Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist. By CPS Protect, you can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code Slam the Gavel for 60% off your first year of Urgent Assist. And this is also available in all 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother, Narcus Golan, passed away in the fall of 2022. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to the Italian Social Services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak nor understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known, and we have Judge Ann Donnelly to thank for this. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. Another announcement, go to the site pleasedoyourjob.com. We need 2,500 more signatures to go. That's pleasedoyourjob.com. I have a return guest on. I'm happy to have Hope Wagner on. She was last on the show April 10th, 2022. She was on season 3, episode 46. She's a grandmother. She spoke out on the system, and she's got 3 granddaughters. Her own daughter was murdered by the children's father. However, she has been ordered to not see her own grandchildren. But the father that has committed the murder has access to her granddaughters. And I welcome you back, Hope. How are things going with you?
Hi, Marianne.
Hi.
It's nice to see you, and we're still working through it, and much stronger than I was when we first spoke back in 22. It was pretty raw after the murder of my daughter, and having her children taken from us, where we couldn't have any interaction with them. So it was pretty raw then. We're a little bit stronger now, a little bit more educated. Dove right into, the recovery process, and we're still working on it. So, but I'm glad to be back on. I'm glad that you're there as an outreach for people. You were a lifesaver to me 2 years ago. There was nobody to turn to, even with all the services that were available. They all leaned towards the issue with the murderer having parental rights, and we were kind of pushed to the side. So to be heard, to actually be heard and supported, you were one of the people out there doing podcasts and radio shows and things like that, to give us a platform, to give me a platform to say this is what's going on, and I'm grateful for that. And you are a blessing. God had gifted you with wonderful talent, and I'm so grateful you're still here.
Well, why, thank you. And I felt your story needed to be heard as well. The
Yeah,
public has to be educated on what happens in life. What happened to you can happen to anyone.
yeah, true, very true. And it can't necessarily be predicted.
No.
It can't really be predicted at times. There's patterns of behaviors and things like that, but again, he was my son-in-law for 12 years, and I saw him interact with his children, and what I perceived, what I seen, there was times of him running through the sprinkler and doing laundry, and there were an incident that I witnessed that I felt that I didn't like the way he manhandled the children, and I brought that to the attention of my daughter. But it was their private marriage, their private relationship, and there's boundaries, right? So you don't want to cross those in other people's marriage. And um, there was decisions that they had to make, and she made a decision that after the children were born, things were different. And you know, he started grooming the children against her in different ways, and
Mhm.
it started creating a frustration to be a parent. And my daughter went to college for early childhood, and her career was going into being a teacher
Mhm.
in the public school system. And she really wanted to enhance. As a matter of fact, before she was murdered, she was promoted to her first classroom on her own
Mm.
as a teacher, and she was so excited about that promotion. And so she was murdered July of 2019, and then her new position was starting that school year.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so
So
sorry.
thank you. She was an excellent uh, individual, an excellent, full of care, and it made her feel good to make children feel good that they sometimes don't have a home that they can come to. They come to school and they look forward to coming to school and seeing the teacher. And she often thought that maybe she made a difference in a child's life. And so she was a good person. We lost a very good citizen in our country or in our state that could be productive and supportive in the human race in a tragic way. So we didn't have much time to talk about her, and I haven't had any time to specifically focus on Carrie. And I've been totally focused on being a voice for her children. And I have a friend of mine that heard me say that one time, and she stopped me right there and she says, Hope, you are speaking of Carrie, and you're doing exactly what she would want you to do and be a voice for her daughters, for her children. And I thought that was, yeah, I am. I talk about her children every day, and I'm their voice. And it got to be a bigger picture for me because now it became for all children. And all of us as adults have to unite together and come up with a solution to eliminate the access to this type of a system that is very destructive. And my battle isn't within the family unit. My battle has been with the fight against the contract that was placed on the backs of my granddaughters.
Mhm.
And that's done even before we went into the trial, the murder trial. There was many people involved that it was just like another day in the job. Everybody was already knew the documents they had to have, the paperwork that they have, um, things to submit into the state. Everybody was doing all these paperworks for the money
Mhm.
and totally lost focus on the needs of the girls. And one of the things for a fact was they took away their grandma and grandpa
Mhm.
because their mother taught them, even the murder of my daughter's husband, the father of the children, taught them about their grandma and grandpa. We were already in their life.
Mhm.
So the system did what they do, and they destroy those natural connections. And then they dump you into a court and say, now go cut each other's throat, you know, go do that. Because I did fight for a long time to pull the reins back, slow down. My family's in trauma, let's get back at the round table. But no, it was just like, let's get the work done, get the documents in and throw them in the court arena and let them fight it out. But there never was a custody issue. There was never a custody issue within my family.
Mhm.
There was the only custody issue was to revoke his rights. That's it. He used his own children in the crime. He groomed them, he prepared them. That came out in trial. But we had all this information during the homicide investigation. So we were talking to detectives the whole time, and they were informing us. The children were questioned. So they became a witness to the crime, and they were questioned by homicide investigators. So they should have been automatically protected as a witness. Not just an order of protection, but protected as a witness to a crime.
I
And
agree.
at the time in New York State, a child at the age of 7, I believe it was I think it's on the books for the law or whatever, age 7, a child could be held accessory to a murder or accounted for murder. And I remember talking to a state representative about that, and since that, that has been changed. It's now the age is 12. So, for example, if a child participates or the parent makes the child participate in the crime, um, and the child is 7 years of age, they could be held accountable for accessory to the crime. And now that's no longer on the books. That's been removed. It's age 12. So that was a positive that came out of it just by having a conversation um, that made a change.
Mhm.
But during that process, the children were not protected. They were forced to their perpetrator. So it was extortion. And I'll say it louder because I've been on all the phones. I've called everybody from the county to the state or whatever that my granddaughters were extorted for profit through the trauma of the murder of their mother. And that's extortion. Uh, Nowhere did they ever have my consent or authority to attach this contract. They took it upon themselves. So I knew then that this was, I always thought, because I was listening to other advocates, like my very first advocate out there that was very powerful voice was Francesca.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I came across one of her videos, and God bless her for her dedication, her work. And the first thing I thought of as let's say a patriot is I'm going to go start picketing and holding my sign in Albany and say, we're shutting this down, but and that was my natural thing to do was to picket for the rights. And that's when I met Francesca and I learned about the corruption that was going on. And I learned a lot from her and in the earlier time after the murder. And so again, the system was broken. That was the frame of mind that I had. And as time went on, um, I had experience that it's not only just a broken system, this is criminal.
Mhm.
This is, and what makes something criminal? What makes something criminal, because I witnessed it firsthand in a trial, is they had to prove intent. They had to prove the intent, the actions that this regular person took. They had to prove he had intentions to cause harm. And it had to be proven in front of 12 peers. That's due process. And
Mhm.
this man's life was on the line. So I firsthand, unfortunately, witnessed that during the trial, and it's very thorough.
Mhm.
Um, and justice was served for my daughter. And he even took the stand. And I had to listen to how much he loved his children and all these other things. And it got pretty bad, some of the things he was saying, but uh, just stomach turning stuff that what his perception of love and caring and nurturing was,
Mhm.
you know, we had to sit through that because he has the right to due process. So, not to go too far into the trial or whatever, kind of stay focused on, how I could perceive that the system, what they did to my family and trauma was criminal, is that people had intent to override my rights, and they had intent to override the rights of the children to be protected. And they really truly believed that what they were doing um, was with authority. And so during my devastation of the secondary crime, because it is a secondary crime, on the outskirts as the grandmother, I'm next to kin to my daughter,
Mhm.
even by nature, um, trying to be a voice for her offspring, which are my heirs. They're uh, my daughter's children. They completely silenced me. And I'll tell you a neat little thing. I know I've tried to find some of the miracles through this process was my granddaughter, my oldest granddaughter, who was mostly affected by this. drew me a picture of herself. And even at the sensitive age of 6, 5 going on 6, her birthday was in August. Her mother was murdered July 29th.
Mm.
She was turning 6 in August. Drew me a picture because she was being forced into being silenced. And she would come to grandma and she would tell me what was going on. And she'd come to grandpa and she was being forced by these people to be silenced. So she was able to draw me a picture to express that she was silenced. And she knew right from wrong that she had the right to have a voice. And all these adults around this child was silencing her. And I was her only hope. I got the picture, I got the note, and I
Mhm.
haven't stopped since.
Mhm.
Um, because children's voices are important.
Mhm.
I personally witnessed a so-called therapist, child therapist, um, say to my granddaughter, and I personally witnessed this, is that children lie, and then made her answer to agree, don't they? And
Mhm.
almost, well, not almost, she was accusing my granddaughter of lying and confirming it that children as a whole lie. And there was nothing I could do because this person had the power of the pen and could have stopped all communication at that point. And I, that was the secondary crime.
Yeah.
And so it was the system I was up against, let alone the murderer. There's two separate things here. Uh, and so I had to make decisions on the spot of how I was going to handle it because we had a long road in front of us. At this point, there wasn't even a second charge yet. There was only the first charge. And the first charge was improper disposal of a body, which put him in custody. And that went over to, again, to family court. Another issue is that he left the children home in the house alone while he went to go get cleaning supplies. So he did have a charge of that, of neglect, and that's what started the family court issue. Um, so we're dealing with a dual court system here. And you had the criminal side and you had the family court side. And they run together because in this country, which is absolutely true, and there's no matter what circumstances, we all have to hang on to the fact that in this country we are innocent till proven guilty.
Mhm.
And that is such a valuable right to hold on to. Um, so there is a due process, and during that due process, he has parental rights, regardless. And that was so hard for me to swallow that he had parental rights
Mhm.
until he's found guilty. He still has the right and access to the children. However, what they failed was the CPS and the team. There was 8 women on this team, and several investigators and officers, and so many people involved that had so much training and insight, more than I could ever grasp, had failed to identify that these children were used in the crime. Or did they identify it and say, well, it's business as usual? And from what I've learned to this point, it was business as usual. And when you want to take away a reasonable voice or a sound mind, um, to voice for the protection of those children, there should have been an order of protection until even after, because they already had the evidence like we did,
Mhm.
and it came out in the trial. So why they felt that they can move forward, uh, with that amount of evidence that he groomed his own children to help murder their mother and then lie to the police and cover up the crime. If that doesn't give you the three indications, they were used in the crime, they witnessed the crime, and they're victim of the crime, then that should be grounds enough for an order of protection and any other parties involved. And they failed those children. They failed them. And the more I fought against the grain of what they were doing, the more they attacked me. My character. They tried to make it as if my daughter was raised in an abusive home. They try to say that I had no relations with the children. It just kept spiraling out of this to where my husband and I were just completely isolated, out of threat, hostile. And I knew then this has to be criminal.
Mhm.
This can't, and if it isn't, hey, it better be. And I started focusing on that. So um, when I when that fear came across, the next step was that go up the chain of command, which is what I did. And even that had failed. There was acknowledgement that there was failure with the children or whatever, but uh, even that they had failed me. They created hostility. So I decided I was going to handle this court situation administratively. And through educating myself and learning what our true rights are and our law, instead of just spieling out, oh my God, this is our constitutional rights and you're violating my constitutional rights, and really not knowing what I was talking about. I really had to educate myself in the history of our country. What does self-govern mean? What do our laws represent, and where do I stand? And um, what are the founding laws of our country? And those are very, very important issues that we have to have as knowledge. But we're told by the family court that we can't even petition or be heard in their area unless we hire an attorney. And well, I experienced that too. And two of them. One that was completely afraid to apply any law, and the other one that threw me under the bus.
Uh-huh.
So, it's like they're not qualified. And over time, I found out that they're not qualified in law. They're not educated in law. They're more educated in theater and process and policies and rules of the administrative court that they're dealing in. And I'm specifically talking about family court.
Mhm.
Um, and that's even in our history about what type of court this is and what it's used for and what it's designed for. So I decided to self-govern and educate myself, and I make it very clear now that I've been trying to represent myself from day one.
Mhm.
And the only responsibility that the court had, or the attorneys for the county, or the attorneys for, that are involved in the case, the attorneys for the children, the attorneys for the county, there were so many attorneys. The only responsibility they had was to follow the due process to get him convicted for the murder of their mother, to protect these children from a perpetrator that was pending a murder trial, and listen to the homicide investigators that the children were used in the crime, and protect them in the family court and in the system. And they weren't qualified. They didn't have any trauma informed training, or they couldn't be a voice. So here's grandma, and grandma's saying, listen, I used to raise I'm going to add this in there. I used to raise my children. I raised three children, three
Mhm.
productive citizens, all did very well for themselves. I was just the compass
Mhm.
for those short period of time. We only have our children for a short period of time. And then they go out in the world and they have to experience what the world is about and people. And I used to raise my children, in a sense of, you just cause no harm, hurt nobody, cause no harm. These are basic rules, basic laws of life. And, going back to being grandmother, uh, raising my children, I would say things like, listen, especially the teenage years, we all been through that. If you have a problem with me as mom, you got to go to your room and go talk to God, is what I used to say. And so I kind of have given them that impression that if you're struggling with the rules or struggling with something in life, you need to pray and talk with God and kind of sort it out. And as my children got older, I always would say to them, if you can't find the peace through, your relationship with God or your friends or your family, don't ever be ashamed to seek counsel and go to therapy, because that was an option too. Um, so when this was happening, I kept saying to myself that I'm grandma, and if these people have an issue with what I'm saying to protect these children, then they need to go talk to God, because I'm not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
God had entrusted me with my own children, and I did the best I could. Was I perfect? No, but that idea of the fact that I have a purpose and I have a duty to protect my kin and to be a voice. There is no ultimate authority other than God. But these people who were in these positions um, truly believe they are the ultimate authority, to the point where they feel comfortable to continuously send armed men to my door unannounced, or calling my phone to serve me court papers to appear in family court for all issues. And they have no authority to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I live in the private, I live in my own sector like everybody else. We all have our privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has a right to trespass on your privacy for whatever excuse they can do. So I battled with that, with their hounds that they sent to my door. My husband was absolutely devastated that this type of power is coming to our home to mandate. I've never had any issues with the law, and I've never had any family court or any of those issues in my life. I raised my family, and you're going to send these armed men to my door with court papers. They sound polite, but we're coming anyway, and we're going to serve these to you. And I hope Kathy Hochul listens to this, because it's under her authority, under the state, that gives that permission, and that needs to stop, because the governor or the state has no right to impede on my liberties, none. And I'm going to be very stern about that. And you're failing. You're placing officers in danger, but you're also placing the public in danger. That's enhancing a very hostile environment, and it needs to stop. And that's coming from experience. Even after I repeatedly said to, you know, stop, or, desist, to stop doing what you're doing, they did it anyway. And that was to try to get me in court. And I asked them, is it an affidavit of service? Is it a warrant? What are you trying to serve me? Oh, we're just got some court papers. Or what court? Well, it's family court. Well, I don't want you coming around here. Mail them to me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't summons me. I have no judiciary business with you.
Mm-hmm.
But that was so that they can finalize their agenda. That's what it was all about, to finalize their agenda. If they get me into that court under their demand, they would think they have the authority to take away my natural rights as the grandmother and silence me. That's been the goal. And that's exactly why I won't step in there. So um, I'm on the fourth judge now, and I haven't stepped a foot in family court. I've raised a lot of ruckus with the clerks and stuff, because you can't enforce me to agree with you that I have no grandparent rights.
Mm-hmm.
You can't convince me that I'm not a party to the case. These are the legalities, the legalese they call it. It's a legal language, jargon, that they try to enforce on a person who lives in the private with natural language. however you want to do it. I don't have to have the degree of liability. They do. They have the degree of liability. I live in nature in private. I don't have the degree of liability, nor are you going to put it on me. Uh, and you have something that belongs to me, and those are my offspring.
Mhm.
They're my granddaughters. And you know, they had plenty of opportunity to step back and really look at what this means. Uh, and the enforcement was overbearing, uh, just overbearing.
Mm.
And they have no boundaries. They'll call your friends to get a hold of you, and that's happened to me. They impede and trespass on your privacy until they get what they want. So, I haven't gone into the court.
Mm.
I did go to the clerk and I submitted an order to produce my grandchildren, and I wrote it in natural writing. I didn't get a form or a packet or
Mhm.
you know, she was very upset of me. My husband and I are sitting in the waiting room, and I submitted my order to produce my granddaughters, because I have the natural right.
Mhm.
And if the murderer of their mother had the natural right to do what he did, and I had to be patient through the due process, and my natural right was totally dismissed, and I was actually told I have no rights. So I stood my ground. I'm still standing my ground, without going into too much detail on all that. But at the end of the day, we have to educate ourselves. We have to educate ourselves and self-govern ourselves and do it peacefully and have the knowledge, because you you can't own the knowledge unless you've lived the experience. And I can't take credit for that saying. That came from a mentor that I've learned it from. Um, and truly, unless you have the experience, you can't have own the knowledge. You got to own the knowledge of the facts. And the truth is, they have no authority. No authority. They have no authority over me. My dominion, none. They can't order me to come into a court, or to conduct in their business. Um, and so when I decided that I'm strong enough to go in there and do a handwritten document, and all I did was on a piece of paper is kind of just, simplified the fact that this is an order to produce.
Mhm.
It was, of course, I'm going in front of it. I'm asking the clerk to go in front of the judge, and it was basically an order to produce my offspring, my granddaughters, and uh, it was an order to produce, and I put it on a regular piece of paper, and I submitted it, and but this is after many attempts of requesting to be placed on a docket for a special appearance. Um, this is not a custody case. It
Mhm.
was never a custody case. I think that's really important to put out there. Custody was already established at birth, if that makes any sense. Custody was already established at birth, and under the extraordinary circumstances that my daughter was murdered, these are her children. Even the coroner acknowledges me as next of kin. The state of New York acknowledges me next to kin, but I have all these other people who feel that I have no rights or have no say unless I fill out one of their packets. And um, it's not a language barrier. I have a right to speak my natural language here. I don't have to be a scholar. I don't have to go to law school. Um, I don't have to do any of those things in order to be a voice for my family, my grandchildren, or just to have my private rights. But they try to put the expectations, and it's so sad because as my husband and I sat there, we sat there for, I believe my husband said we sat there for 6 hours, with the document I submitted, just to be heard in front of the judge that in order to produce, so that we could be a voice and say, listen, Are you aware what your clerk and your administrators are doing out there to the people in order to get in front of you to express the fact that we have a very serious situation here with my granddaughters? Denied, denied, denied at the window. So I'm not going to allow a clerk who isn't qualified in law to dictate to me that in order for me to be heard, I have to file a petition for custody, or I have to file a petition for visitation. And I did look on the New York State Courts documents, or that you could fill out or print out or whatever, and none of those documents pertain to my situation. Who am I petitioning? The murderer? That's not my job.
Mm-mm.
Who am I petitioning? The court? Who am I petitioning? The CPS worker who silenced me? How about all the 7 case managers that are attached to this case? Or how about the 6 non-for-profits that all made money off of my family's trauma? Who do I petition? So there isn't anything on the New York State Court's documents that obtain to my particular case. So basically, I had come to the conclusion that I stand firm here. They threw me into a court situation. The only job they had to do was remove his rights, which they took a long time to do. They dragged it out because there is a day process. There's like how many days go by, and then the monies kick in, or however that works. So they have to drag it out for 8 weeks or 28 or 28 months or however they got to do it for this grant money, which I haven't really researched a lot of it, but I do know that's the problem. Um, but meanwhile, I'm over here saying, but I'm grandma.
Mhm.
Okay. I was born the party,
Right.
right?
Right.
I was born to be the party here, but they don't feel that I am because I didn't fill out one of their silly packets.
And
And
even if you did, there's no guarantee they would honor.
oh, yeah, I heard those nightmares too.
Mm-hmm.
Now I had to swallow some of this stuff that, okay, I get it. He's the father. You're absolutely right. And there's a due process to take away his parental rights. And there is. And it takes a whole lot to take away parental rights. And I have to accept that. That is part of the law of the land. It's nature's law. And that was tough because I automatically think, well, you know, well, he did this to my daughter, an eye for an eye,
Mm-hmm.
right? He'll never see his children again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in the reality of things, and the reality is that there's several factors that could have taken place during this. For one, it could have been a mistrial. So we can't take away his parental rights before a mistrial. He has the right to due process. They have a right to due process. I don't want to put a he or she on it. I want to kind of stay focused on the people.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody in that situation um has the right to due process, has a right to their children. And at the same time, you have this other court over here that is failing to investigate or stay parallel to what the investigation had found it, and in family court take that into consideration to protect the children. Okay, that was a failure on their part in family court because everybody knew. I brought the children into to the detectives because over time they started talking about some of the things they seen and what they witnessed. And anybody who can understand which I've learned through the detectives or whatever, it's only the first 48, 72 hours are the most valuable time for any type of investigation to get close to the accurate of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that did happen. The children were expressing things, and we got in contact with the investigators, and the children were questioned. So that made him a witness. It, it's on record that they questioned the children. So makes me wonder, how far back you want to go with children who were, I don't know, I never did any research. Be interesting to find out how many children were charged with crimes that maybe shouldn't have been charged with crimes after being unlawfully investigated or questioned without an attorney because they didn't have an attorney. My grandchildren didn't have an attorney present when the homicide was investigating. It was just, so there was another error there too. There's several of them. So yeah, and I guess the point is that is the system broken or is it elegantly designed for the profit? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. Yeah.
that's how I see it. It was absolutely all around that funding, all
Hmm.
of it. And my family was extorted. Our trauma, those children were extorted for profit. And I had full say of those children. In fact, I was the one that got them medical care. I had to find out who, see, my daughter was a mother. She knew the pediatrician. She, had the insurance cards. That was all at the house, all taped off with yellow tape. And I had to find out if they can go in the house and find any information on who the children's pediatricians were. The children were in shock. They were just in shock for what they witnessed. They
Oh,
got zero medical attention. Grandma comes in. I didn't think of it that way, that that's what they were doing wrong. I just thought grandma knows I got to get these guys to a doctor. That's just natural. I know what they've seen. I've heard what they've seen. We got to get them to their doctor, to the pediatrician. So I took them to get medical care, and their medical care was ongoing. So October 23rd, when the caseworkers called us in, my husband and I, this is the fourth time the family was called in, but this particular time it was just my husband and I, and we were told we could no longer see the children, and that's it was devastating,
I cannot imagine.
devastating. I'm making decisions for them. I'm in contact with their pediatrician, and the children are in shock. It's just, but they're going to release them to a madman who had a very sick-minded. He was in a sick-minded set of mind, and so that was the secondary crime. That was a secondary crime, and I'll keep saying that. And I hope that the governor hears this because I'm not going to contact her office. She's never reached out to me.
Mhm.
None of her none of her other people. And she was often in our backyard here. She shakes a lot of hands with a lot of these politicians in my backyard.
Mhm.
Comes down and cuts ribbons for new businesses and has lunch and
Mhm.
everything else. But here's a grandmother talking to everybody possible, trying to get on the radio, trying to get someone to hear me. Called everybody up there, the attorney general, and everybody knows what the case was. And if they say they never heard of it, they're lying
Mhm.
because they come down and have lunch and they talk about it. We're
Mhm.
not idiots. And, the people I really believe have had enough.
Yeah.
And we're rising
Mhm.
and we're going to put this back on track of, it's we the people are going to keep things in check. And we're tired of being threatened, intimidated, fear mongered. These are the conversations I've been having now for the past 2 years. Shape it up or get out.
Mhm.
And children first, human trafficking is going to stop, and child trafficking, and children for cash, and all this other stuff. And anyone who thinks they have the authority to come to your house and take your children, uh, I'll tell you, they don't. It's written in law.
Mhm.
And if I had to sit there for due process, unless it's, obvious, you see, an obvious child, I don't want to take that away. We need something, of course. But this cherry picking for profit is coming to an end. And, just as a grandmother, more grandmothers and more women need to rise and talk about this issue. And this isn't a male female. It's not that. It's a humanity issue. It's a global issue. It's a national issue. We have to protect our children. We have to talk in a sense of a mutual base, whether some of the things we like or not. And like I had to digest the fact that he was the father. That was it. He was the father of those children. And he took my daughter, but he was the father. And I had to digest that and wait for the due process. And I spoke with the attorney. I kind of put the well, I did. I put the attorney on notice that was representing the case, um, and allowing it to drag out so long, and giving him the option to surrender his rights because she practices social services law.
Mm.
And so I had called her up one time after being hung up on and laughed at and mocked and ridiculed. I had called her one time and I asked her if she was a mandated reporter,
Mm.
and she got really frustrated with me. But you have a duty. I don't care what job you're on. You have a duty as a human being that if you see something, say something.
Mhm.
And she put that um her job and her daily duty, on her job before three children being forced to a perpetrator. And shame on her.
Mhm.
And her name will be exposed, but we're still in the middle of all this. But I'm going to make a whole list because it has to be. It's not because I'm vindictive or anything like that. And there's some room for error because I'll tell you, some of these caseworkers and I, I I just have to back up a minute and say when the team was developed, we all sat around a circle and there was 8 women. And I thought, I'm not alone in this. And I have my family, my daughter and my son and my husband and her son husband and my other grandchild. We're all here and I always felt that I had the impression that we're not in this alone.
Mhm.
And this is a good start because I had no idea what was going forward. How am I going to explain all this to these children? Um, and you know, watching some of these young women coming out of college, we have to give some of these caseworkers and them a benefit of the doubt because they're being educated wrong. They may come out of college like my daughter. She went through college to be a teacher, um, a elementary school teacher, but then she goes into the training, which is what these caseworkers do. They go from college into their training facility, which is completely designed and operated in the best interests of the state because it's a
Mhm.
state training agency, and that has to be completely revamped. Uh, it's hostile. It's because I went to the state building. It's closer, the training facility, not just state building, but I took a drive out to the training facility, and no sooner did my husband and I pull up in the parking lot, we were met by a security officer. And I understand, I mean, the caseworkers, I'm sure their job isn't easy, but we have to give some benefit of the doubt that some of them are coming right out of college and they're being trained wrong, improperly, and they're being trained to be hostile
Oh.
and they're and overbearing.
Mhm.
Um, and I think there's a good start there. They're not being trained in law or rights. That was very clear. Every single one of them told me I had no rights. So, um, I think we have to take some of that into consideration. And then we do have some bad apples in the crop.
Mhm.
But when we're looking at our leadership, shame on them all.
Mhm.
Shame on that they got the authority and of the oversight of them, not the authority and oversight over me or other people and families. Um, so we have a big issue in our state, in our country, of placing who has what authority. And we have to do it peacefully. We have to do it respectfully. And we're definitely in that shift of time right now. And you know, we have people who are hurt and angry, and we have people who are truly trying to make a difference, and then we have people who says we're never going to change it. Um, but we have to step back and say, we have to sit back and step and look at ourselves and say, what do we truly know about self-govern?
Mhm.
What do we truly know about our history of our law? What do we truly know about what's really going on in the politic body? We, the people, are the politic body.
Mhm.
They work for us. And we have to be respectful when we say that. But when people are coming out of training centers with the idea that I am the power, I am the authority, and I'm going to walk into your home, and if you don't listen to me, I am going to bring this sheriff over here who doesn't even know if he took an oath of office, and they surround you, um, you have to stand up to that tyranny
Yeah,
because,
I
yeah.
think CPS should just be completely abolished because there's too many bad apples at the bottom of the barrel. And
Oh, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I know another agency has to go in its place, but I think they've got to pay these people a little bit more, but they have to have degrees in psychology, child psychological abuse, as well as the other abuses, but they don't. And I think
Oh,
we have
trauma
more.
informed care.
Right.
Trauma informed care.
Eh,
And don't tell me the
yeah.
funding didn't come in, because if you ever, anybody ever, well, I just listened to other women and men who've investigated that. We're talking billions of dollars, and it was, sent out to the local agencies for trauma informed care, and there wasn't one person that qualified in that area to handle a family or a child in trauma.
Yep.
When by the time you get to CPS, there's trauma.
Right. 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 That's why they're just very forceful, abrupt, rude, ignorant, inept, and they don't know anything about child psychological abuse, the trauma, nothing.
No.
They just want to take a child out of a home and put him into foster care, to make money. It's kids for cash. It's a big
Yeah.
extortion scheme.
It is extortion, and when you want to call them out of it, you have to deal with the threats of that.
Mhm.
You have to deal with threats. They're doing very, very unlawful, unlawful actions on a regular day would have people arrested. Um, but we have sheriffs that are working within the within the units. So we have to get our sheriffs out of those buildings. They have no business in there. The state has state police,
Yeah.
okay, that they run. The state police aren't there to protect us. The state police are there to protect the state agencies,
Mhm.
okay? Even though we pay for it, that's what they're designed to do, is what they're trained to do, is to protect the state. They're state officers. It's the same thing, which is, if we step back and we really learn about the law and self-govern, that's correct. And stay away from me.
Mhm.
Okay, we can't have both sides of the pendulum here. Okay, if you want to know who you are in law, and you stand your ground in your own rights, your own liberties, don't expect to have a state trooper to come to your aid and then be angry at them because they didn't. There are the state police are to for the staff, and we're paying for that. Can we change that? Yes. Our sheriffs are for the people, by the people, but they're getting paid by the state, you see? So there's a conflict of interest. Automatically a conflict of interest. The sheriff's departments have depleted to nothing. And over the decades, I have to, now with the realization of what I've researched, we the people let that happen. We
Mhm.
allowed the sheriffs to stand in DMV for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week for decades and get paid. The sheriffs are supposed to be seen very little unless we call upon them. So, in the reality, when this happened to me, um, and I had a problem with one of my public officials, should have been able to turn to my sheriff and say, Sheriff, they just stopped me from seeing my grandchildren. That's unlawful. They're my children. They're my
Mhm.
daughter's children. That's unlawful. I have a right to my kin and to protect them. And the sheriff, being educated in law, working for the people, should have went in over to that person that made that decision, that official, and say, but that's not the law, right?
Mhm.
So we have nothing to be that in between and to negotiate for us or help us process what the law is. And, you know, it's been kind of infiltrated into that. And we, the people, allowed that. We have to honor our sheriffs. We have to get them, properly educated. And I just witnessed this. Like, I'm going to go back to my experience just recently. It was only 2 weeks ago. I wrote by handwritten. I didn't use their documents. I hand wrote on a piece of paper, which was a big step for me because, from what I understand of being free and living in the private and respecting my rights, is I don't have to put anything on a piece of paper. My word is my bond, and I can just go to the window and say, I'd like to, and ask, may I be placed on the docket for a special appearance to be heard from a judge? And I should be accommodated. I don't have to go through an 18-page document. See, it's $1 million business,
Mhm.
and I have a right to be heard in this country, but they silenced my speech, and it was a very urgency situation. So, um, when your policies cross over the law is where we're having a problem. And so, in my lawful self, in my self-governing, okay, and knowing what the boundaries are, um, my rights are unalienable. You can't force your policy on me that I have to fill out an 18-page packet. Okay, those days were over with decades ago. I
Mhm.
remember my father fighting for that. And I'm middle-aged now. So those battles have already been won and sought for. So when you go to the window and you are requesting to be heard, there should be a qualified clerk there, educated in law, and do a vetting process or screening process or whatever. And in some courts, you have to do paperwork. I understand that. But there's certain times that there's an urgency and
Mhm.
people make mistakes and they make decisions in people's lives that are ending up very detrimental. And one of them happened to be they just decided that we couldn't see the children anymore. So the children weren't going to get any medical care. I mean, because I was taking them to the pediatrician.
Mhm.
So where do you go? So I ran over to you're calling everybody you know, and I ran over to someone told me to go to family court and a- ask to speak with the judge. I went there. She says, "Oh, the only way you're going to do that is if you get a lawyer." And I mean, it was such a mess. And this is how children end up falling through these cracks,
Mhm.
and they end up missing. They end up dead. They end up there's no protection. And but I agree with you. Marianne, these people come out of these training facilities, and we should have every right to visit those facilities. And we should have every right to walk in there with a camera and talk with these people very calmly, very peacefully, and see our tax dollars at work. They
Mhm.
work for the state. We should be able to walk in there and have cordial conversations. And they have to create the privacy for themselves and for their clients. But it's just a hostile environment. Then you're telling me I have to appear in your court after you just sent what, 8 armed men to my door for court papers? It was mind blowing to me. Scary. I can't even. It's not even funny. I couldn't even laugh at it. It was scary. My husband, he was totally intimidated with a man sitting out in a white Bronco in front of our home watching
Yeah.
us and for that moment to deliver a paper that had no authority to it. It's terrifying. And this is our country. This is where we are. to
Yeah.
protect children. I mean, so I took the time and I educated myself. And I took the time and I really searched out what our country history was. There's some great mentors out there, scholars of law. Half of the attorneys for family court don't even have the proper law.
Mm-mm.
They have a dual system. They're sworn oath to the court. They swore an oath to the court. You can't have that. There's right off the bat, you're against the odds. Um, and some of them know it, and some of them don't.
Mm.
Some of them know it. Some have just been trained to the next generation, and next generation have just been trained. This is how we do things. This is protocol. Because just a couple weeks ago, I'll go back to that again. I wrote on a piece of paper in order to produce my grandchildren. My battle is between the contract and me.
Mhm.
I want that contract off the back of my grandchildren. I don't have to answer to you, your court, or anything. I have full rights in custody of those children. This was never a custody issue. But what they do is they'll remove an attorney and add another attorney to the child,
Mhm.
and they just keep doing that over and over again. And then they impeded on my right of, well, we're going to provide you a referee. We're gonna provide you a referee so we could referee your family life.
Oh.
And I don't need a referee. And by what authority do you have the right to think I do need a referee? I don't need your services. Okay. This is me acting in my right, my private right.
But
They're impeding on me.
they like to drag the case out. This is the
Exactly.
mm,
But the only way they could do that is if you open the door, and it's called a contract. Okay. You fill out those documents, you are now going into contract with their policies. Okay. I haven't filled out any of their documents. I'm not in contract. I wrote on a piece of paper to in order to produce, and that means I'm requesting the clerk to put me on the docket to go in front of the judge. And that's exactly what I've been asking. That's administrative. And not only that, you can handle the administrative outside the court process. Some of these issues in our families that we're dealing with don't even have to go into this big
right.
theater with all these attorneys and yelling matches, and this is all promoted.
Mhm.
It's all promoted. It's not there's no de-escalation process or anything like that. It's very well promoted.
Mhm.
But
It's well
again,
yeah, it's well designed. They know exactly
yeah,
what they're doing.
they know exactly, and they want to create the baratray. It's called baratray. And that's where I stood my ground with the clerk. And so I'm sitting there with my paper and I go to hand it in. And she was very upset with me. And she brought her sheriff guard there. My husband were just sitting there on the bench. We're far from harmless.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we're just sitting there. My husband's, close to retirement. We're just sitting there, grandma and grandpa. I'm not saying there aren't people out there who would probably start it. And maybe on a day back in the day, I might have. But all I'm saying is that we're just sitting there, and she automatically brought over an officer with her, a sheriff, and there's several other sheriffs. Plus, they have court security. Plus, they have regular security. So there's three levels of authority there from different agencies, and one happens to be the sheriff. Um, and wanting to uh, interact with me and trying to shove the papers at me. And I'm putting my hands up, says, no, I'm not taking those. But they were hostile right
Oh.
out of the gate, hostile. And she says to me, well, when you submit an order to produce, what I understand that to be is that I am ordered to produce an inmate from the jail to the judge. So I'm starting to think at that point that maybe there's a language barrier between the public and the way that they're trained.
Mhm.
So I stopped for a minute and I says, okay, well, that's okay. You can have that perception of order to produce. But order to produce for me in a lawful act, which is what I'm doing, exercising my
Mhm.
rights in a lawful act, is in order to produce my offspring.
Mhm.
You have the degree of liability. I don't. And I do not have to use your legalese words. I could just say, I want them now. And that should be accepted as in a court, in a clerk. Um, and by what authority? By what authority is the big question.
Mhm.
By what authority do you have to hold my family from me? Number one. Number two, the other question is not just necessarily jurisdiction, but it could be not just necessarily jurisdiction, but it could be subject matter. You have to have clarity. You have to have, they call it the clear field doctrine.
Yeah.
Okay, the clear field. What's the clear field? What authority? Prove your claim that in order for me to have what belongs to me, I have to petition for permission. You see, they don't have that, but they're enforcing the illusion that they do, and they have jurisdiction because they have the thugs with them.
Mhm.
And I could see her frustration too.
Mhm.
So, but again, this is decades and decades of being trained and running a business, because that's exactly what it is, running a business. And she's got bills to pay, and she's concerned about her mortgage, and she's concerned about her family, and she may have children or whatever. um but the what I picked up on is that they were the elite.
Mhm.
They were the elite, and they were well off, and we're going to do it their way, and it doesn't even go past her. And so there's the issue. That's what has to be cleaned up. It has to be cleaned up, and we need to hold the feet to the fire and say, listen, prove your claim.
Mhm.
What power of authority? Where is the Clearfield doctrine that says that you can say this to me? And where did you ever get my consent to put a contract on the back of my granddaughters to keep us in this marriage? Because that's what it is. I'm being forced to have relations with this clerk.
Mhm.
And I'm not talking to as a person, as a personal person, because she probably goes home and cries on her pillow like a lot of us do at the end of a hard day, right? We've got to keep it human. I'm just talking about with the authority. And, where is my consent? Well, you have to fill out this packet because this packet says right here, you got to be a party of the case. You got to be a party. Well, show me the Clearfield doctrine or the proof of the claim that I'm not a party.
Mhm. Well, I've also found a lot of these clerks are not human. I'm not cutting them any breaks. I can't.
Yeah, I
I
know.
I think the
Yeah,
courthouses should be cleaned out. They all
I
should
believe.
be cleaned
Yeah,
out.
it's that stern. It's that stern, and it's been
They
going on for so long
and
that
these
it's almost bred in there. Yeah,
right, these clerks have a lot of power.
yeah,
And
yes.
because I won't keep you all afternoon, but I'm just telling.
No, we could talk. I enjoy
Oh,
it.
I
It
know.
helps me. It really helps me too. So yeah,
Well,
I hear.
I know I'm going to have you back on too, but I mean, I've had a clerk tell me I know a lot of people in the courthouse and I'm friends with all the judges, and she was right.
Yeah,
So I've also had a clerk tell me, I know why you got your kids taken away from you. So I had to set her straight on that. Through false
yeah.
allegations and legal kidnapping. That's how they got taken away. And
Yeah,
then I
yeah.
said to her, you do know he's versing me. And she's so stupid. She goes, what does that mean? And I said,
Yeah,
he is versing me. And then she goes, oh.
yeah. It is those kind of responses, and that is on every level of government. Because I had gone up the chain of command. That's the way. I mean, I'm just, looking at it that way. You got to go up the chain. You go to the supervisor, then you go to the director, and you go to the regional manager. I did all that. I went all the way up, but it was always a fight, a fight, a fight, a fight. being put on hold for 45 minutes,
Mhm.
hung
Mhm.
up on or disconnected, or, then you get to the point and say, oh, well, they're in a meeting. And there's sometimes that some of them, they're not fooling me. I can recognize their voice and they're pretending to be their own secretary. It's obvious,
Mhm.
but let them do what they have to do, and they can do what they have to do. And they are perfectly legal within that side of the street. You see where I'm coming from?
Mhm.
They are legal within their behind that wall. Okay. But when you start to enforce on my it's unlawful. There's see words are important. There's legal, then there's lawful. And what they're doing is perfectly legal. If you want to sign on I call it a contract, a
Yeah.
con job. You want to sign on the piece of paper and not self-govern yourself, and you're going to sign all these contracts. I didn't sign any of them.
Mhm.
And there's so many attorneys involved in this case. But they all have agreed that I had no right as the grandmother. They've all said it. You have no rights.
Oh my gosh.
And that they said it to me 2 years ago. And then once you try to convince them, you're fighting for the right you already have.
Mhm.
And see, they know this. They know that that's what it's all about, and it creates stress. It creates toxicity, hostility. Um, you know, a terrible environment. Some people have lost their lives over. It
Oh,
gets that
yes.
heated, and children end up missing or dead because they're enhancing the problem. They're not helping the problem, the issue at all.
Exactly. I agree.
So, what a difference it is from back in the day. And I think I said this on the first show I was with you with. What a difference that was, because I remember I was just a kid. I was like 9, 10 years old. And back in the, 60s, late 60s, 70s, I remember my father at that time, my father who was born in 1929, which he was born as a young man into the Great Depression.
Mhm.
And so growing up as a young boy in the farm country, dirt roads, and then, coming to be a young man, he thought he fell in love with my mother, and they were going to go to where there was going to be a suburban, bigger city for better jobs, better opportunities for his children. And so he did that, and he moved to the suburbs, right on the borderline of a bigger city for more opportunity for his children to have a better education than he did, because he didn't have one. He went into the military,
Mhm.
but and through the Great Depression, and then that was his dream for his children, always to do better, always for them to have better opportunity, and he worked his whole life. And then during that time frame, um, my mother and him, they had a child. It was my sister before me. I was kind of like, wasn't a planned thing, but my sister was kind of a planned thing. She was baby number 4. Had severe brain damage at
Mhm.
birth, and it didn't come out to light till first grade and first, second grade. And my sister started deteriorating. And so I remember my father, because he took me with him, uh, went to the Department of Social Services, and he stood in this long line, and he got to the window, and the woman gave him this really thick packet to fill out and said, here, fill this, go over there, fill this out, and then come back through the line and see how we could help you. And my father, who worked his whole life since he was a boy, uh, kind of pushed the packet back to the worker and says, no, 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 I don't need this. I'm not here for a handout. I'm
Mhm.
here because my daughter has a right to an education in this country, and they kicked her out of public school. They wouldn't allow my daughter to attend to accommodate her needs,
Mhm.
and that was part of the birth of the American Disability Act,
Mhm.
because it was shortly after that came to be a real stronghold. And then more things started building off of that, where instead of, children like my sister, or young adults or people with disabilities, instead of putting them in a psych ward, they were pulling them out of the psych ward and putting them in independent housing. They were getting them advocates for ADA and
Mhm.
things like that. And uh, the American Disability Act. Well, here we are all these years later.
Mhm.
And we're thinking this system that should have knowledge of this um, is actually violating these laws.
Oh, it is.
And it's insane. And the accommodations need to be there. So there's my point with the law. Why I went in with a piece of paper, because we have people in this country, even in this modern times, maybe people like my father, that never really completed school. He went right into work. He was a carpenter and a laborer, and he didn't really have much of an education, but he knew long enough that he had his rights to be heard and not fill out. Maybe he didn't know how to write, and he slid that packet back, and he just said that my daughter has a right to an education. And that's what it should be like today.
Mhm.
I shouldn't have to even know how to write to be heard in a court of law.
I
I
agree.
should be able to politely walk in and mind my manners and request that I be placed on the docket for a special appearance to speak to a judge
Mhm. Mhm.
to resolve my issues.
I agree.
And we shouldn't, and if we don't stand up for this, we have many young families right now. And I watched it. I watched these young people come in and they're just starting out in family court. They're surrounded by these attorneys and they're negotiating money. And the one over here, I watched her and she's crying. And the other gentleman, the young guy over here, I see him. He's got to be 25 years old, pulling out his wallet, talking to the attorney. I don't think I can afford anymore. I don't think, and seeing the cycle of devastation for the rest of their lives start all over again. And because we've made it through the other side.
Mhm.
And so, as a grandmother, uh, watching this and through experience and having grandchildren and my young family and their children and the children coming after that, I just felt like printing out a big flyer and handing it out to everybody at family court and says, "Listen, you don't have to do this. Educate yourself. Know what your rights are. Try to work things out with the other partner who is the by right, by nature's right, is the other partner to the child, as hard as it may be. If
Mhm.
it's to the point of that despair, there's no way this court's going to help figure that out. They're just the system the way it is, it's not going to help you guys figure this out. It's going to devastate your life.
Mhm.
And so there should be supportive services. They should be in check. Um, I think the judges that are participating in the swindles need to
Mhm.
be exposed.
Yep.
Uh, I mean, go for it. That's how I just there was a big Supreme Court case about it just came past. I forgot the name of the case, the Brunson brothers, and went to Supreme Court about I don't know if you heard about that one, Marianne, where about the bar members and these attorneys that are bar members and stuff. And the Supreme Court ruled that they have every right to be a part of the bar. It's a membership. It's no different than any other snowmobile club or, bicycle clubs or whatever. It's a club and they have a right to be to it. Unfortunately, it's so massive that it's a club that is very supportive against with attorneys that will participate and not stand up for the right of the law. They're standing up for the right of their policies or the right of their uh for their club members. And I've witnessed that myself. Nobody can explain to me or come up with an explanation why there are 14 attorneys attached to this case that I'm involved with my grandchildren. 14 attorneys. Not one attorney stepped up to the plate and said, "Wait a minute, they're a victim of a crime here. He used these children in this crime. We need to do something. I mean, we have to talk about this." As far as him being able to visit with the children, not one attorney, including the children's attorney. There was two of them. One already passed away. He
Well,
he is aged out. So
it's all dereliction of duty, and you know,
Yeah.
I'd love to have you come back on.
Oh, yes. I'd love to keep going and
Oh, we will keep going because you're coming
yeah.
back on. And
Thanks.
how can people reach you?
I guess the best way is my email. Hope for the best with it's the number 4 underscore 711 at msn.com.
Do you have a site on Facebook or not?
No,
Okay.
no. I don't have a site or anything like that. I have a private Facebook. I'm slowly weeding away from the, computer world. It's amazing that before my daughter was murdered, I had a very simple life. I think my children were trying to force me to get a cell phone. I had a flip phone.
Uh,
I didn't even want that, but they said, "Mom, you should have it just in case." And so I did. I got the flip phone, but now I got a laptop, an iPad, a cell phone, and I just want to kind of get back to some
yeah.
normalcy since the murder of my daughter. And I'm hoping that the issues I'm still dealing with were, like I said, I'm hoping to see a judge number 4 here.
Hmm.
Um, but they have a law, it's maritime law. Uh, they have a certain way of running their business, and they have the right to do that. But they don't have the right to run their business to unlawfully keep me from my offspring. And
Right.
they have done that. And there's going to be due process for this. If you live in the light of the truth, and I'm not coming at anybody in a threatening form, as angry as I am. I was calling up in earlier, Marianne, when we were first doing the podcast. I was in trauma. I was calling all the authorities and everybody. I was telling them I'm having them all arrested. You're all getting arrested. That's all I
Hmm.
kept saying. You're all being arrested because you're invading. You're taking my daughter's children.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna have y'all arrested. I didn't even know what the word arrested meant. And
Mm.
actually, arrested doesn't mean they're gonna get handcuffed and thrown in the back of a cop car. Actually, is arrest in the true definition of law is being we're gonna put a stop to this.
Hmm.
That's the arrest. And then you have arraignment and all these other words that we have to use in our vocabulary. So, um, but at that particular time, I was calling everybody, having everybody arrested. So, but
Oh,
they here you and I get it, and but it is up to we the people to, and I have some other personal things that I've experienced from what I came across that I would say, you know what, somewhere along the line, the people have to take responsibility for allowing this to happen,
I
and
agree.
I'm one of them. I just assumed until it happens, and I just assumed it was taken care of, and I take some accountability for that. And that's why I'm here. That's why I mean, many times I just wanted to pack up and say, okay, I'm done.
Hmm.
I I can't this has really depleted my life for the past couple of years. So um, I want to get on the other path of this and bring the solutions to the table. There is going to be accountability. There is going to be transparency. I'm not out to hurt anybody or ruin anybody's career, but I am not going to sit idle and allow people to destroy people's lives and think they have more authority than we the people. It's not going to happen.
Hmm.
Uh, and there is a path for that. There's a certain way we need to conduct ourselves, and if they're gonna, force it against us, which is what they've been accustomed to, um, and continue with the tyranny, uh, it's going to get even more out of hand. And I think that's where we are as a country.
Yep. Yep.
And my only defense to this point is learning the language of self-governing in our law and controlling my emotions and trying to put in perspective of what is the goal and giving the permission for not just me to live in error, but also some of these people who were trained inappropriately. And I've had sheriffs tell me I'm just doing my job, and I already know he's impersonating a sheriff because I read the sheriff handbook.
Mhm.
I could take an oath of office because I've studied your book. So
Right.
I
Right.
recognize, yeah. So I've recognized the
Ah,
sheriff is not in his duty, right?
no, no, they're not.
Right.
They're not.
Yeah.
But I'd like to have you come back on in the future because we're gonna have another good talk. I'm
Oh,
telling
I'd love to do it. We should get a
so.
couple women on here. I'm in.
So hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I am your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption. Please join us again here in the future with Hope Wagner and other exciting guests. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, iTunes, Anchor FM, and feel free to donate to buy me a coffee to help support this podcast. I totally thank you, Hope. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marianne. It's been great as usual. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.